A guy retires with $680,000 saved, house paid off, financial advisor says he's good, the calculators all turn green. 18 months later, he's back at work. Another couple retires together after 38 years of marriage. They last 9 months before filing for divorce. A third guy has 2.1 million in his 401k, retires at 58, and 6 years later he's supporting two adult kids, a grandchild, and his spending rate has destroyed his plan even though nobody got sick and the market went up. None of these people ran out of money in the traditional sense. They all passed the number test. So what happened? Here's what I'm going to explain today. Retirement readiness isn't a math problem, it's a systems problem, and most people are testing the wrong variables. I'm going to walk you through 5 structural cracks that show up the moment you retire, cracks that were always there but invisible while you were working. If even one of these describes you, and you ignore it, you're not retiring into freedom, you're retiring into a very expensive problem. By the way, I built a free early retirement calculator because most online ones use fantasy math. This one uses the actual distribution models from BlackRock and Vanguard to expose weak points in your timeline. I only ask for your email to send the report. I don't store your financial data. Links in the description. So here's the model. Warren Buffett has this line about how you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. Retirement is the tide going out on your entire life structure. All the things your paycheck, your employer, your routine, your identity were covering up, they get exposed fast. And the people who think they're ready, they're usually testing whether they have enough money, which is like testing whether a building can handle an earthquake by checking if it has enough bricks. You need to test the foundation. You need to test the frame, because the stress is coming from directions you're not even looking at. Let me start with the first crack, and this one catches almost everyone. You've never actually lived on your projected retirement budget. Look, when you're working, your spending is invisible in 2 ways. First, certain expenses just disappear into the category of I'm busy or I deserve this. You buy lunch out 4 days a week because cooking feels impossible when you're exhausted. You pay someone $120 a month to mow your lawn because time is money. You're constantly buying convenience because you're constantly tired. And second, you're not tracking any of this, honestly, because the paycheck keeps coming. So when you sit down to plan retirement and you think, I'll cut back when I have more time, what you're actually doing is making up a number that sounds reasonable and hoping that your behavior magically changes. Here's what actually happens. You retire. Now you have unlimited time. But your habits don't change. They just become more visible. And new expenses appear that you never budgeted for. You're home more, so utility bills creep up. You finally have time for hobbies, which somehow all require gear and memberships and classes. You eat out more because you're enjoying life now, which still costs $18 for a sandwich. Travel spikes because you're finally doing all the things you postponed for 30 years. And here's the part that breaks people. They projected a monthly spend of, let's say, $5,200. They were confident about this number. Then 6 months into retirement, they actually tracked their spending and it's closer to $6,800. That's a 29% gap. On a withdrawal rate, that's the difference between your money lasting 28 years and lasting 19 years. There's a guy I knew through my business network, sold his company, retired at 61 with about 1.4 million invested. His plan was to spend 70,000 a year, which at a 5% withdrawal rate gave him comfortable runway. 2 years in, I ran into him at a conference. He was back consulting. I asked him what happened, figured maybe he got bored. He said no. He tracked his actual spending after a year and he was at 92,000. Between helping his daughter with rent, taking trips with his wife to make up for lost time, and just generally having zero discipline because there was no external structure forcing it, he was burning through his money 31% faster than planned. He didn't run out, but he saw the math and knew if he didn't course correct, he'd be in trouble by 70. Here's the test. And it's simple, but most people won't do it. Right now, while you're still working, try living on your exact projected retirement budget for 6 months. Track every dollar. No rounding, no vibes-based accounting. If you project $5,200 a month, spend exactly that and see what happens. See what you have to cut. See what you actually can't cut. See which expenses you didn't even know existed. If you can't do this, or you try it and realize you're way over, you don't have a retirement plan. You have a wish with a spreadsheet attached. This is where it gets interesting, because even if you can live on your budget, there's a second structural crack most people miss entirely. You've never managed your own financial infrastructure without an employer doing the heavy lifting. Think about what happens automatically when you're employed. Your 401k contributions are taken from your paycheck before you see the money. Your health insurance is chosen from 3 pre-vetted options during a 15-minute meeting. Life insurance is just provided. Someone in HR answers your questions. Most of your tax documents are automatic through payroll. You are, financially speaking, on rails. And for many people, especially those who spend decades at large companies, they have never operated off those rails. Then you retire, and suddenly you're the chief financial officer of your own life. You have to understand portfolio rebalancing, which means actually knowing what asset allocation means and when to adjust it. You need to navigate Medicare Parts A, B, C, D, and decide on supplemental coverage from literally dozens of options. You have to handle your own taxes, including calculating required minimum distributions starting at 73, where if you mess up, the penalty is 25% of the amount you should have withdrawn but didn't. You need to manage estate documents, coordinate insurance without an HR department. And here's the thing, most people have no idea how to do any of this independently. Let me give you a concrete example. Required minimum distributions. At age 73, the IRS forces you to withdraw a percentage of your traditional retirement accounts based on their life expectancy tables. Let's say your account balance is $400,000. Your RMD for that year might be around $15,000. If you forget, or you calculate wrong, or you just don't understand the rule, the penalty is 25% of what you should have withdrawn. That's $3,750 just gone because you didn't know how to read an IRS table or take Medicare. You have to choose between original Medicare plus a Part D drug plan and a separate Medigap supplement, or you choose a Medicare Advantage plan that bundles everything but restricts your network. The cost difference between making a smart choice and a bad choice is easily $3,000 to $5,000 per year. And if you miss your enrollment window, you can face permanent penalties on your premiums for the rest of your life. The people who've relied on employer systems for their entire career, they hit retirement and they're overwhelmed. So they either pay someone, a financial advisor takes about 1% of assets under management annually. So on a 700,000 portfolio, that's 7,000 per year. Tax prep for retirees with multiple income streams can run 500 to 2,000 annually, depending on complexity. Or they don't pay anyone and they make expensive mistakes that cost them more. Either way, if you haven't budgeted for this, there's another hole in your plan. But let's say you've got the budget dialed in and you're competent with your finances. There's a third crack, and this one is uncomfortable to talk about, but it's real. You haven't stress tested your marriage or primary relationship for 24/7 proximity. Here's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. Divorce rates for people over 50 have gone up significantly over the past few decades, and retirement transitions are a known stress point. The reason usually isn't infidelity or some big dramatic betrayal. It's proximity and loss of independent identity. When you're working, you and your spouse spend maybe 4 to 5 hours a day together on weekdays, more on weekends. You have separate social circles from work. You have different routines. You have conversation topics based on separate experiences. You're living semi-independent lives that intersect in the evenings and weekends. Then you retire and you're together constantly, all day, every day. For some couples, this is wonderful. For others, it reveals incompatibilities that were manageable when you had built-in separation. One person wants adventure and travel. The other wants routine and staying home. One is social and wants constant activity. The other is introverted and needs quiet time. One wants expensive hobbies. The other wants to be frugal. These differences can coexist when you're apart 50 hours a week. They can become constant low-grade conflict when you're together all the time. And here's the financial part. Gray divorce is financially devastating. When you split up after decades of marriage, you're taking assets that were meant to fund one household and now they have to fund two. Instead of one mortgage or rent payment, there's two. Instead of shared utilities, transportation, groceries, everything doubles. This can cut your retirement resources in half while increasing your total expenses by 50% or more. I watched this happen to a couple I knew from the business community. Both retired at 63, seemed solid, married 36 years. About 2 years into retirement, they divorced. The guy ended up back in consulting not because he wanted to, but because his half of the assets couldn't sustain his lifestyle alone. The wife moved in with her sister. Neither one of them expected this. They just discovered that spending every waking hour together for the first time in decades revealed that they'd been living parallel lives, not a shared one. Here's the test, and it's going to feel awkward. Take a 2-week vacation together where it's just the two of you, 24/7, with no other family or friends. Not a cruise with structured activities, not a busy sightseeing trip, but something relatively unstructured where you have to navigate free time together. Can you do it without major conflict? Do you run out of things to talk about? Does one of you need constant breaks from the other? If you can't pass a 2-week test, what makes you think you can handle 20 years? And before you retire, have explicit conversations about expectations. How will you divide household responsibilities when both of you are home? What are your individual space and alone time expectations? How will you balance together time versus separate interests? What happens if one of you develops a hobby the other has zero interest in? These conversations feel awkward because you've been married 35 years and you think you know each other. But if you've never discussed how you'll structure your days when you're both home full time, you're making assumptions. And assumptions are where retirement plans go to die. Now, here's where most people think they're safe because they've got their relationship solid, they've got their budget tight, and they know how to manage their accounts. But there's a fourth crack, and it's sneaky because it doesn't look like a financial problem until suddenly it is. Your family and social circle don't know you're planning to retire and you haven't set financial boundaries. This is what I call the boundary collapse problem. Here's the pattern. You retire, word gets out that you're comfortable financially, and everyone in your orbit starts treating you differently. Adult children who are managing fine suddenly have emergencies that need money. Friends expect you to be available all the time because you're retired, and what else do you have to do? Extended family assumes you're now the bank. Studies show that a huge percentage of retirees provide ongoing financial support to adult children, helping with rent, car payments, student loans, expenses for grandchildren. The problem is that zero retirement calculators assume you're going to be a secondary income source for your adult kids. If you're planning to withdraw $35,000 annually from your savings, but you're actually giving $8,000 to your daughter and $6,000 helping with your aging parents, you're actually withdrawing $49,000. That's a 40% increase in your burn rate, and it absolutely will affect how long your money lasts. What makes this particularly destructive is the requests come gradually and they're framed as temporary, just until I get back on my feet, just until the divorce is final, just until I find a better job. Temporary has a way of becoming permanent when there's no exit criteria. Beyond money, there's the time boundary. Many retirees end up providing massive amounts of unpaid childcare for grandchildren. Some people genuinely love this, but often it happens not by choice, but by family pressure or guilt. You're retired, you have time, can you watch the kids Tuesday and Thursday? And suddenly every Tuesday and Thursday for the next 5 years, you're raising someone else's kids. And that wasn't actually how you wanted to spend your retirement, but you never had the conversation that would have prevented it. Most people haven't had these uncomfortable boundary conversations before they retire, so they default to yes out of guilt or obligation or just lack of practice saying no. Here's the test. Have an explicit conversation with your adult children about your retirement finances before you retire. Be clear, we've saved enough for our retirement, but we do not have extra funds for ongoing financial support. If there's a genuine one-time emergency, we can discuss it, but we cannot be a regular income source. This feels harsh. It feels like you're being a bad parent. But clarity is kindness. It's better to have this conversation before you retire than to say yes for 5 years and then suddenly have to say no when you realize you're going to run out of money. Set your availability boundaries with family and friends before you retire. Be specific. I'm excited to have more time, but I'm also building a routine that includes my own interests. I'm available for babysitting twice a month scheduled in advance. That's clearer and healthier than being on call constantly. And practice saying no now. If you can't decline requests for your time and money while you're still working, you won't magically develop that skill in retirement. The fifth crack is different because it's not about what you haven't prepared for, it's about what you're moving toward. You're retiring from something instead of to something. This is the purpose vacuum, and it's different from the typical find hobbies advice you get from retirement planners. This is about specificity versus vagueness. There's a massive difference between vague intentions and concrete plans. I want to travel is vague. I will take a 3-week trip to Japan in October, visit 5 specific cities, stay in these hotels, and learn basic conversational Japanese beforehand using this app. That's a plan. I want to stay active is vague. I will complete a sprint triathlon by September, which requires training 4 days per week starting in March following this program. That's a plan. Why does this matter financially? Because retirees without specific goals drift. They sleep in because there's no reason to get up. They watch more TV than they intended because there's nothing scheduled. They spend money impulsively trying to fill empty time. They get bored, restless, dissatisfied. And when people are bored and lacking purpose, spending patterns change. There's more impulse buying. More entertainment spending because why not? We have nothing else to do. More eating out because cooking requires motivation and motivation requires purpose. This spending creep wasn't in the budget. Plus, lack of purpose affects health. When people don't have reasons to stay active, engaged, socially connected, physical and mental health decline. And declining health means increased healthcare costs that also weren't projected. Here's the test. Right now, write down 3 specific, measurable goals you want to accomplish in your first year of retirement. Not vague wishes, but concrete goals with success criteria. Learn to play guitar isn't specific. Learn to play these 15 songs at this proficiency level by December 31st is specific. If you cannot identify 3 concrete goals right now, you're not retiring to something, you're just stopping work and hoping it works out. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't. Look, here's what nobody tells you about retirement readiness. The financial calculators, the Monte Carlo simulations, the 4% rule discussions, all of that is testing whether you have enough bricks. But retirement doesn't fail because you ran out of bricks. It fails because the foundation was cracked and you never stress tested it. The 5 signs I just walked through, these are the structural tests. Have you ever actually lived on your retirement budget, or are you just assuming you'll spend less? Can you manage your own financial infrastructure without employer systems, or are you going to pay someone $7,000 a year to do it? Have you stress tested your primary relationship for 24/7 proximity, or are you assuming it'll be fine? Have you set boundaries with family and friends, or are you going to be the retirement ATM? And do you have specific goals you're retiring toward, or are you just stopping work and hoping purpose finds you? If you recognize yourself in even one of these, don't ignore it. Address it now, before you retire, not after. Because once you retire and the tide goes out, everyone's going to see what was always there but hidden: your spending habits, your dependency on employer infrastructure, your relationship dynamics, your inability to say no, your lack of purpose. And fixing these problems in retirement is 10 times harder than fixing them while you're still working, because in retirement, you've already burned the boats. So here are your 3 tactical moves. First, do a 6-month test run of your retirement budget while you're still working. Track every dollar, see where the gaps are, adjust before you retire. Second, take over complete management of your finances 2 years before retirement. Do your own taxes, research your own insurance, manage your own portfolio. If you're overwhelmed, build the cost of professionals into your budget. Third, have the uncomfortable conversations now. Talk to your spouse about expectations, structure, space, and goals. Talk to your adult children about boundaries. Tell your friends what your availability actually is. These conversations feel awkward, but they're cheaper than divorce, cheaper than supporting adult children for a decade, and cheaper than rebuilding a social structure after you've already burned out. Bottom line, retirement readiness isn't about having a number. It's about having a system that works when all your current coping mechanisms disappear. Test the system, not the number. Don't work for money, own the companies that do.